Welcome, everyone. We're diving into a topic I think we can all relate to, attachment. We're checking out this book, Gita for Joyful Living. And it's interesting because it takes these ancient ideas from the Bhagavad Gita and tries to bring them into our modern lives.
Right.
And one thing that really stood out to me was this idea that to be truly joyful, we need to move beyond just self-awareness
Yeah.
and get to this deeper level of self-knowledge. And guess what they say is the biggest roadblock on that journey?
What's that?
Attachment.
It's so true. It's fascinating how this text, it uses all these situations that are really relatable.
Oh, yeah.
Like imagine dealing with betrayal or family drama, like conflicts over inheritance,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
or even someone at work trying to sabotage you.
Ugh. Yeah, those are tough.
Right. And we use these examples to get us thinking
Yeah.
about our own lives and how we'd react in those situations.
It's like we all have these things that happen that kind of throw us off balance. So how does this idea of attachment play into all of that?
Well, those situations often highlight the things we're most attached to. In this book, it says attachment is so much more than just, romantic relationships.
So what else are we talking about here?
Could be anything. People, possessions, our status, even something as simple as your first cup of coffee in the morning.
Okay, so I get that we can be attached to things like, our phones or a favorite sweater, but how is craving coffee the same as being attached to your family?
That's where it gets really interesting. It's all about this feeling of dependence and expectation. Attachment means that you don't feel whole or secure without that specific thing or person in your life.
So it's less about the thing itself and more about how much we rely on it.
Exactly. And that's a really important distinction the Gita makes between attachment and love. Love doesn't try to control or possess.
It's like that saying, if you love something, let it go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like imagine a mother whose son is going abroad for school. Of course, she's going to miss him terribly, but her love doesn't hold him back from following his dreams.
Wow, that's a really powerful way to think about it. So attachment is a lot more nuanced than we might initially think. But where does it even come from? What makes us get so hooked on these things or people in the first place?
Well, Gita for Joyful Living says that a big part of it is ignorance, which we'll dive into more a bit later.
Yeah, okay.
But for now, two main drivers they talk about are physical and mental association.
Physical and mental, what does that mean exactly?
Okay, so think about your coffee example,
Yeah.
right? The more you drink it, the more your body craves it. That's the physical part.
Right, right.
But then the more you think about that first sip, the more you want it.
Yeah.
And that just makes the attachment even stronger.
It's like a vicious cycle. This is making me rethink my whole relationship with my phone.
Right.
But how do we know if we're really attached to something? Are there any signs we can look out for?
That's such a good question. The Gita says to pay attention to feelings of anger and fear.
Oh.
Yeah, these can be big indicators of attachment. Like let's say you get really into a show.
Yeah,
Seems harmless, right?
totally.
But then imagine someone interrupts your watching schedule, and suddenly you feel this wave of frustration, maybe even anger.
Okay, yeah.
That's the attachment showing itself.
It's like those times when someone criticizes something you're super into and you get all defensive.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. We often don't realize how attached we are to something until it's threatened or taken away.
Oh, this is really making me think about all the ways I might be holding myself back without even knowing it.
That's exactly the point the Gita is trying to make. It's not about becoming completely detached from everything.
Right.
We're human, after all.
Yeah.
It's more about recognizing those attachments,
Okay.
understanding how they affect us,
Yeah.
and then learning to, loosen their grip on us a little bit.
So recognizing them is the first step, but how do we actually start to loosen that grip?
Well, Gita for Joyful Living talks about how important it is to understand the nature of our attachments.
Mm-hmm.
And it introduces this fascinating concept, the four modes of the mind.
4 modes of the mind. That sounds intense.
It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward. Think of it like different parts of ourselves that are always interacting.
Okay.
So first there's manas. Manas is that indecisive part of us, the one that's easily swayed by our senses, like what we want in the moment.
Oh, so like when I'm trying to be healthy, but that piece of cake is calling my name.
Exactly. That's manas at work.
Yeah.
Then we have buddhi, which is our intellect, the part of us that can reason and analyze.
Okay.
Helps us make judgments, hopefully better ones than manas sometimes.
So Mana says eat the cake, and Booty's like, maybe not.
Exactly. And here's where attachment comes in, ahankara, our ego, our sense of self. Ahankara is all about protecting itself, holding on to the things it thinks it needs,
Okay.
which can lead to being overly attached to things that seem valuable or pleasurable in the moment.
So my ego is clinging to the cake because it makes me feel good, even though my intellect knows it's not the best choice.
Precisely. And lastly, we have Cheetah. Cheetah is like our memory bank. It holds all our past experiences, impressions, even those connected to our attachments.
So, like, if I gave in to my cake craving before and felt bad afterward, Cheetah's going to be there to remind me of that next time.
Exactly. You're
Oh,
getting it. And what's really cool is that the text says that as we become more aware of these four modes of the mind and how they work together, we can start to see our attachments more objectively.
what do you mean by see them more objectively?
Well, it means noticing when your manas is being swayed by a craving, or when your ahamkara is clinging to something out of fear or insecurity.
Yeah.
Even recognizing when your cheetah is bringing up old patterns that aren't serving you anymore.
Okay,
Like
yeah.
creating some space between what's happening and how you react to it.
So it's like hitting the pause button before I go on autopilot?
Exactly. And the Gita suggests that it's this ability to choose our responses instead of being ruled by our attachments.
Okay.
That's what leads to more joy and fulfillment.
That makes a lot of sense, but these attachments feel so ingrained in us. How do we even start to cultivate that level of awareness?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And luckily, Gita for Joyful Living gives us some practical guidance.
Okay, good.
It really emphasizes the importance of self-knowledge as the key to breaking free.
So we've talked about self-awareness and now self-knowledge. What's the difference and how do we actually develop it? So we've talked about self-awareness and now self-knowledge. What's the difference and how do we actually develop it?
So self-awareness is like recognizing those four modes of the mind at work, right?
Right.
Self-knowledge is digging deeper. It's asking yourself, why am I wired this way? What past experiences or beliefs are shaping how I react to things?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And Gita for Joyful Living suggests some practices to cultivate that self-knowledge.
Okay.
One of the most powerful being introspection.
Introspection. So like a mental checkup.
Exactly. Taking time to really examine your thoughts, your feelings, your motivations, everything.
Okay.
Like ask yourself, why am I reacting this way?
Yeah.
What is this emotion telling me about myself, and my attachments?
Yeah.
The more we understand our own, internal landscape,
Right.
the better equipped we are to deal with those attachments, in a skillful way.
That makes a lot of sense. But introspection on its own doesn't sound like enough. Like, how do we actually start to shift those deep-seated patterns that we've been talking about?
And that's where the practice of detachment comes in.
Yeah.
And before you worry,
Okay.
this isn't about becoming some unfeeling robot,
Right.
It's more about shifting our perspective a little bit.
Okay, so then what does detachment look like practically?
So Gita for Joyful Living
Yeah.
uses this really helpful analogy of a gardener. A gardener, they care for their plants, right? Giving them what they need to thrive,
Right.
but they don't try to control how tall they grow or what colors they bloom.
Okay.
And in the same way, detachment means engaging with the world, the people around us,
Yeah.
with care and attention,
Right.
but also letting go of the need to control everything.
So it's about accepting that things change, and trying to hold on too tightly just causes more suffering.
Yes, exactly. By practicing detachment, we can kind of start to loosen the grip of those attachments a little bit.
Okay.
And that creates more space for inner peace, more freedom.
This is all making a lot more sense now. So if introspection and detachment are the practices, what can we do, like day to day, to actually cultivate them?
Gita for Joyful Living really highlights mindfulness in our everyday activities.
Okay.
Being present, whether you're eating, talking to someone, even just walking down the street.
So instead of rushing through my to-do list, I should try to slow down and really be present in each moment.
Exactly. When we're fully present, we're less likely to get swept up in those thoughts and emotions, especially the ones that are fueled by our attachments.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It lets us respond to situations with more clarity and purpose.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. But before we wrap up, I have to ask, is there a shortcut to all of this? Like, how do we just let go of our attachments?
Wouldn't that be nice?
Right.
Unfortunately, the path to joyful living, it's a journey.
Right.
It takes effort. It takes self-reflection, a willingness to actually change our habits.
No magic pill.
Not quite. But the journey itself, it can be incredibly rewarding. As we become more aware of our attachment, how they influence us,
Yeah.
We start making choices that are more aligned with what's actually important to us.
It's like we're freeing ourselves to live more authentically, more joyfully.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And that's really what this book is all about. It's not about being perfect, getting rid of every single attachment.
Right.
It's about understanding ourselves better, being more aware, making choices that lead to more peace, more fulfillment, more joy.
This has been an amazing exploration of attachment through this lens of the Bhagavad Gita. It's really incredible how this ancient wisdom is still so relevant to our lives today.
It really is. And, I think what's so cool is that this text, it doesn't just tell us these things. It gives us actual tools we can use, today to cultivate more awareness, more freedom, more joy.
And that's what makes this deep dive so valuable. It's given us this whole new perspective on something that we all experience, and then some real practical steps we can take to deal with our own attachments in a better way. And for anyone listening who's like me and wants to learn more, we'll be sure to link to Gita for Joyful Living in our show notes. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deeper.